May 21st, 2013. A friend of mine came over. He'd always come over sometimes. He'd be like, let's go Bigfoot hunting. And I'd be like, whatever, whatever. And we rode around, and it kind of been raining on us earlier, and it stopped and everything. He was hanging out the window with the flashlight, shining it all around. All of a sudden, he jumps back in the car and rolls up the window and said, Heather, there's something out there. Me personally, I think he's just messing with me because of the fact that I'm telling him about Bigfoot. I dismiss it. And he's like, Heather, there's something out here. And I'm still like, you're messing with me. Just stop. And finally, I just kind of watched what he's talking about. And over in the field to the right of us, there was like, at first I thought it was like the towers with the red lights flashing. That's what I thought it was at first. Because all you could see was like these lights just blinking. And I said, oh, that's nothing. That's just a light over there by that house. And then I thought, wait a minute, there's no tower over here. So I get to watching it, and there was clearly, you could see, like, I would say it was two red eyes. They would blink in sequence, like, and it was just hopping all around the field. Low, high, and it was getting closer and closer to us. And I told him, I looked at him, I said, listen, if this is Bigfoot, I want to catch him on camera. So I get my phone out, and I put it on the camera. My car's still going, and I get out of my car and go to walk in front of my car. And finally he goes, Heather, if it comes after you, you're on your own. I thought about it for a minute, got back in the car, and I'm still thinking that he's messing with me. We get down to the driveway to the girl's house that I was at. I turn back around, and I was on 206 then. Turn back right on 40. Go around the curve. As I'm coming back up the hill, all of a sudden, there it is. It walks out in between these two houses, and he was like a reddish brown color. And you could clearly see all the structure of him, his muscles, everything, how the hair hanged. I mean, like, the hair on his legs it was more stringier, and it hung more than it did around his arms. It was shorter up around his torso, around this part of the body. I mean, and it was more like visible, like you could see his skin. And around his face, I mean, it was shaggy, but it was still kind of clear. He had hair from here, and it kind of went shorter, and then shorter around here. And the way he looked at us, he just walked out into the middle of the road and just bows up his chest, looks straight at us, and walks off. Kind of like, I dare you. The guy that was with me, he curls up in the seat. I mean, he's 6'1", 6'2". He curls up in the seat like a little baby and says, did you just see that? It took me a minute. And as we passed where he was standing at, I slammed on my brakes and went, did you just see that? You just seen that, right? And I threw the car in reverse, went to the driveway that he crossed at. And you could clearly see him at the back of the wood line going into the woods. And I was like, come on, come on, come on. He's like, no, you're on your own, I'm scared. I was like, all right. So I went back home and got him to tell my mom what he had seen. And after he got done, because we didn't talk about it after that, and got him to tell my mother what he had seen. After he told her, I told her what I seen. Our stories match up to the T, how it was. And to this day, he will say Bigfoot is real. That one right there, the time I seen him right then and there, that's just kind of like, I wish somehow somebody could get some kind of image out of my brain to print it out, because that's just like a perfect way. Oh.
What would you say to somebody that says, oh, that's just a person in a costume?
No way. No way. And I believe that the reason the red eyes then is because he was the reddish brown color. The place where the monster's crossing out, where I've been seeing him at, is just right along. It's right there at Boggy Creek. And maybe a couple fields over is where the Beanfield incident back in the 70s has happened. I mean, it's right where Fouke Monster Central, right there.
Common denominators. There are quite a few of them in the world of cryptozoology, hallmarks of these odd, unexplainable cases which help us to sort and categorize them, and which recur frequently enough that they become the points of data by which the reported encounters are analyzed. They can be as mundane as the weather or location in which a sighting occurs, or as bizarre and frightening as the tropes of a horror film. While sightings of so-called cryptids themselves are considered generally aberrant or inexplicable, they are not without overlapping patterns, and these patterns give some sense of continuity to the astute observer. They help us to speculate over what kind of cryptid report one is examining, or what phenomenon is at play. Using recurring visual and behavioral motifs often observed in the entities we seek, we're able to construct theoretical profiles for these hypothetical animals. They rarely lead us to unimpeachable conclusions, but do give important frames of reference. In the varied and storied world of Sasquatch, there is a list of common denominators so frequently recurring that even a person with only a passing interest in the subject is likely to be able to name several of them. For starters, Sasquatch is nearly always described as being 6 or more feet tall. Its size, when contrasted with that of the average adult human being, is the foremost element mentioned by many eyewitnesses. That is not to say that there isn't the odd occurrence where a Sasquatch-like creature is described as smaller. We see this in descriptions of the apple devil of Appalachia or the orang pendek of Sumatra, but these are rare and fairly anomalous. A muscular build is generally in play, with stories of thin or wiry Sasquatches few and far between. Usually it has hair which is thick, dark in color, either black, brown, or even reddish brown, though there are the odd instances where hair is described as light and sandy, or even white. It often gives off a strong, foul odor compared with and equated to all manner of disgusting things. Upright locomotion is, of course, nearly always a factor, as well as the presence of footprints, huge, sometimes sharply defined, deeply set tracks too large to belong to a human being. There are behaviors which are often mentioned, such as loud knocking noises, howls, and rock throwing, and even stalking or following humans who intrude in its domain. The Sasquatch is often perceived as both territorial and elusive, driven to action when encroached upon, but still reticent to be seen beyond fleeting, perhaps unintentionally yielded, glimpses. Some recurring aspects are less common but do arise often enough to give the observant researcher pause. Facial features are sometimes described as human-like. Occasionally, Bigfoot is seen in proximity to areas thick with UFO sightings, such as the Chestnut Ridge. Sometimes, Bigfoot is said to vanish into what witnesses describe as portals or wormholes, seeming to disappear without the aid of any means known to science. It has also been claimed that Sasquatch communicate telepathically, an act described in some encounters as mind-speak, and a concept mirrored in some native traditions. There are even stranger observations which lead to even stranger theories. Between the very expectable animal traits, behaviors, and descriptions we can easily assign to a primate, and the more bizarre, seemingly paranormal ones, lies one frequent aspect of Bigfoot reports which seems to have elements of both. Something which is occasionally found in known animals, but which is also mentioned alongside countless other supernatural, paranormal, and perplexing events. And though it is sometimes seen in the known animal kingdom, it is not seen in human beings or our close evolutionary relatives. Shining red eyes.
When it comes to the reports of red eyes associated with relic hominoids or Sasquatch, really 3 things come to mind, or 3 potentials, and I think it's important to draw distinctions between these. One is the idea that there are quite literally red eyes, or that there is a reddish coloration to the eyes. We see some indigenous American traditions that describe Sasquatch-like beings, and sometimes we hear descriptions like they are bleary-eyed or other things along those lines. More commonly, how that is interpreted in modern reports is that the reddish coloration is reflection of light during nighttime encounters. But therein there are also two possibilities, and these are very important to consider. One simply being that when light reflects off of the eye of a Sasquatch in nighttime conditions, for whatever reason, the color is red. Now, the simple biological reason for that would be the concentration of red blood cells within the pupil of the eye. But of course, as is often observed with nocturnal animals, you will sometimes see what's known as tapetum lucidum, which is actually the result of light reflecting off of a thin, very reflective membrane that's within the eye. That can cause a variety of different colorations in the reflected light.
My uncle does not believe in Sasquatch whatsoever. He thinks what we do is silly. Having the channel is silly. Hunting for Bigfoot is kind of a joke, and he laughs about it and pokes fun at us, of course. But then, you know, you throw a couple of whiskeys in him, and he'll tell you that he was out camping up at Sunburst, which is it's just south of the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's on the edge of the Pisgah National Forest. It's a little area called Sunburst. But we used to go camping up there when I was a kid. And you can go up there, go camping, and it's way back up in the mountains. It's near Cold Mountain, actually. And he was camping up there with a couple of his friends. And he left the campfire to go take a leak. And he goes into the trees, into the wood line. And he's there and looking. And he sees these two large, red, self-illuminated eyes, like glowing eyes, just looking at him. And he's telling me this story, and I'm like, well, how high up are these eyes? He goes, oh, about 7 or 8 feet. And I was like, okay, so what do you think that is? Well, I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's like, okay, so you don't think Bigfoot is a thing, but you think this is totally normal, that there's like red eyes glowing at you from 8 feet in the air. He goes, well, I told it I wouldn't mess with it if it didn't mess with me. So it's just weird how that disconnect occurs.
Well, if we think about this, so we have a lot of pictures, you know, whatever, but nobody has ever had that red eye shine, you know. So I'm thinking that as we look at all the data that's going on, that again, so if Bigfoot is a flesh and blood creature, then, you know, possibly being able to use infrasound, we could use, you know, talk about that. It would possibly using pheromones as well too. But his attributes become more and more supernatural to the point that it takes it out of the realm of the biological and inserts it firmly into the metaphysical. And therein lies the problem, because if we're going to look at the Bigfoot phenomenon as something that's scientific, then we have to use scientific methods in regard to our research. Now, if it is not part of this world or part of this realm or part of this dimension, then we throw all that stuff out, right? Because that becomes something that no longer interacts with our physics. But I think from a researcher's point of view, it's best to kind of have a baseline to go in there and say, we're going to start out believing that this is a biological animal until something else proves differently.
This fellow is driving down this dark road this particular night. He has his low beams on, catches something standing on the side of the road, moves up slowly, turns on his high beams. That's when this 7-foot-tall, huge hair-covered creature walks out right in the middle of the road, stops directly in front of his car 5 feet away, and is staring directly at the driver of the car with these glowing, luminous red eyes. He said the eyes were like beet red in color. He said it turned, he said he could see its very long arms and legs swinging. It ran across the road, up a hill. He followed it for a short distance in his vehicles, and then it was just gone. It was suddenly just gone. Didn't see it anymore. He got a very, very good look at this creature, gave us a very detailed account of what it looked like, and that was quite interesting. but there's been more reports since then.
So whenever I was researching my book, The Unexplained World of the Chestnut Ridge, I was coming in with these interviews of people repeatedly talking about red eyes, right? This red eye shine. And sometimes the eyes were even glowing without any kind of light source around, as if they were emanating eternally. You know, there was some sort of light being produced. Now, mammals don't produce any kind of light like that. And if we are to believe that Bigfoot is a creature out there within our environment, in and of itself, that is a hard thing to believe. But then we have to start taking into other accounts that, so this creature that is pretty, the possibility of it being out there is pretty low, right? But people are seeing it all the time. But not only that, but also, you know, its eyes glow. Oh, and not only that, but also has like telepathy, and it can disappear at will. So it keeps on going and going and going. So what I try to do whenever I was doing some research is make some sort of sense about red eyes.
I've definitely have heard many encounters about the red eyes. You know, and I myself, the one experience I had encountered something that I would probably refer to as red eyes, not saying they were red eyes, but that's the closest thing you could compare them to. And you know, I don't know what that is. Okay. That just makes, I don't know that that's Bigfoot, to be honest. I mean, if you made me give you an answer, I would almost think that that is something more paranormal than Bigfoot. But that being said, could Bigfoot in some cases be a paranormal entity? I believe that probably is the case too, especially if we, you know, believe that they are more human than they are animal. So if they were an animal and we're seeing, you know, them as an animal, as a spirit with red eyes, hey, that very well could be the case too. But there's enough people that have reported red eyes, or what they believe are red eyes, to know that there's something to that.
I had a report of a strange orange object hovering only about 100 feet off the ground in a business section of Pittsburgh. Within the hour, only miles away, there was a large family gathering having a picnic. They were having a big cookout. They had dancing and music in a wooded area. And that evening, their large dog got very agitated, got very upset, began to growl, and then something very heavy was heard walking in the woods, walking through the area, howling back. And they said when this thing was stepping bipedally, that they could hear it actually shake the ground as it hit. Now, this was a large area, and different people were in different parts of it. One fellow, though, was at about 60 feet from where this thing apparently stopped, and from the glow of the big campfire, he sees this 8-foot-tall, very huge, muscular, hair-covered creature standing with luminous, glowing red eyes staring at him. And he said it was making this very loud, heavy breathing sound. In fact, he said he could see its huge chest going in and out as it was breathing. And then it turned to walk back into the woods, and the other people heard it going off into the woods. And I guess one other fellow from that group also saw it moving away. So it was a very interesting, so that was within the hour, within miles of each other. So that's intriguing, but then it gets even more exciting. In September, out in the Dairy Ridge, in September, only a few miles from the Dairy Ridge in Dairy Township, a man is riding in his vehicle. It's a rainy night, about 75 feet away. He says this creature suddenly appears out of nowhere in the middle of the road. It's about 6.5 to 7 feet tall. He can see the long, large humanoid shape, very broad-shouldered, but he said it's very strange because it looks like it's all made of mist. It's misty looking, but you can see the whole shape. And he said it was kind of stooped, like it had bad posture. And he said beyond that, it was even strange because he said it looked like it was floating or gliding above the road into a field. Then a few weeks later, in October, On top of the ridge, it's a beautiful morning. This person's taking a walk near the tree line. Here's this loud sound. Walk closer into the woods. There's this very large old tree trunk there. And as this person looking closer realizes here's this 7-foot-tall, shaggy creature with its arms completely wrapped around the bottom of that tree like it's trying to camouflage itself, like it's hugging the tree. It has its face and its cheek against the tree, looking directly at her. Got a very good look at this thing. She said in this case, the eyes were very, very dark. She was very, very shook up, very frightened. She said she ran to a tree about 10 feet away to get her composure and thought, you know what, I'm going to load my cell phone up and try to run and get a picture of this thing. She does that a short time later, and it's gone. Then she's only about 10 feet away, and she said she thought it was a little odd that she never heard the thing moving away. It gets even more interesting. Early November, down in the Mon Valley outside of Pittsburgh. So the Mon Valley are these small communities that kind of parallel along the Monongahela River. Been a history of Bigfoot sightings going back down there to at least the early 70s. Many reports even in recent years. This fellow is driving down this dark road this particular night. He has his low beams on, catches something standing on the side of the road, moves up slowly, turns on his high beams. That's when this 7-foot-tall, huge hair-covered creature walks out right in the middle of the road, stops directly in front of his car 5 feet away, and is staring directly at the driver of the car with these glowing, luminous red eyes. He said the eyes were like beet red in color. He said it turned, he said he could see its very long arms and legs swinging. It ran across the road, up a hill. He followed it for a short distance in his vehicles, and then it was just gone. It was suddenly just gone. Didn't see it anymore. He got a very, very good look at this creature, gave us a very detailed account of what it looked like, and that was quite interesting. But there's been more reports since then, even more recently. I interviewed a fellow in the last week. This happened at the end of November on a road, 4-lane road between Greensburg and Delmont in Westmoreland County. So it's only miles from this general area, not that far from the ridge. And from what he told me, he said he's riding down the road that evening and a car is beginning to pass him. Suddenly they both stop in the middle of the road. They have their high beams on because there in the middle of the road is this 8-foot-tall, huge, hairy creature just standing there looking at them with very long arms. They watch this thing, and he said the strangest thing was it didn't turn or walk off the road or move. It just suddenly vanished right in front of us. And the guy in the car next to me put his window down and said, "Did you see that?" And the other fellow acknowledged. So we're hoping to be able to find that other witness. There was another witness in the original car of the driver I interviewed. And there have been more reports since then in the last week. So something very interesting is going on right now with the reports that we're getting from widespread areas and different people. And myself and some other researchers are looking into these cases right now.
While often witnesses will mention noticing eyeshine, others describe a distinctly different phenomenon. Eyeshine requires an ambient light source to occur and can be utilized even in the presence of weak ones, which might prove ineffective in aiding the sight of human beings. Supposing Sasquatch has nocturnal attributes, sightings of red-eyed Sasquatch might simply be explained, despite absence of this trait in known species of primate. Very often, however, the red eyes which complement Bigfoot's ensemble seem to be alight with their own internal source of illumination. A far cry from observable and known animal eyeshine, and hinting at the possibility of stranger things than simply an unknown species of primate or hominid. True bioluminescence has not been identified in any known species of mammal, never mind primates, and the closest we come are some mammalian species who will appear to glow under an ultraviolet light source. Also consistent with real-world eyeshine, red is not the only color which has been observed in these odd cases. Witnesses have described eyes ranging across the polychromatic spectrum, prompting endless conjecture as to what the cause might be. Bigfoot, apparently, can have eyes of blue, white, yellow, and orange. A variation in eye color could easily be a trait found in known animals. Even domestic dogs and cats have diverse eye colors. Eye shape and color are varied across the primate family, further indicating that Sasquatch may have a place in our own evolutionary family tree. In some cases, such as the eyes of chimpanzees and gorillas, they may appear almost human at a glance. Other species, such as spider and night monkeys, have large, round, globe-like eyes, allowing for their nocturnal lifestyles. Descriptions of Sasquatch eyes often fit both categories, very frequently mentioned as human-like, while other, seemingly more incomprehensible cases deal in similarities to the globe or orb-like eyes found in smaller species.
So I've had some really cool experiences here. The one that comes to my mind first is while I was out at Gray Station, which is a very active area of the ridge. I was out with Billy Willard, a former researcher, Phil Bracco, another researcher, and a friend of mine who was new to this field. And we had walked down the train tracks probably about 2 miles, and there was a soybean field off to our right and a wooded area off to the left. And we set up, Billy and Phil were off to the, looking at the woods, and my friend and I were out looking at the soybean field. Soybean field was cool because the fog starts rolling in, you have the state mental hospital behind, just like a scene out of a horror movie. And then I hear Billy yell, "Hey, I have some eyeshine down here." So I go up, walk down, and sure enough, you look over, you can see the eyeshine coming out of the trees, just big orange, you know, massive looking eyes that were blinking on and off at a, you know, rhythmic state. Nothing that you could tell was static standing there, wasn't reflectors or anything like that. It started to rain pretty heavy, and as we're packing up, a rock gets thrown at us. Well, that's kind of an impetus for us to start moving a little faster, and as we're walking down, a softball-sized rock gets hurled between myself and Billy, missed my face about this much. If it had hit me, it probably would have broke my nose, or it was pretty intense. That was one instance. I recorded an interesting exchange of vocalizations between myself and something in Keystone State Forest. That was really cool. Keystone State Park, I'm sorry. It was just at the, not too far away from a general parking area. We had gone into the woods, hiked in about maybe a mile, and we started hearing this, what literally sounded like a cow in the woods, right? So I mimic it back, and not too much longer, it mimics back to me. So we start moving our way back to the source of the sound, and this exchange is just going back and forth. And on the recording, my friend Chuck, you could hear him say, "He likes you," like whatever it is, like we're getting a response. Brought it to Stan Gordon. I asked Stan, you know, how far is the, you know, closest farm or something around here? Is it practical for a cow to get lost in the woods or another type of animal? And Stan goes, "I don't know, I've never heard that before." So that was pretty interesting.
In terms of the prevalence of actual colors that are observed and reported, I mean, in general terms, you often hear the description red eyes. This is something that, frankly, if you go back and you read a lot of Sasquatch reports and reported encounters from over the decades, and not just in North America, actually Sasquatch-like relic hominoids throughout the world, you'll often see descriptions of a red-eyed monster, a creature with glowing eyes. Red is usually the color that's associated with that, but really if you dig into the reports and you read the accounts, what is often referred to as red may sometimes actually be more like an orange red or even a yellow orange.
Probably the one that stands out the most to me happened in a different part of the ridge, kind of back in a game land area, and we were back there for several nights or several hours, I'm sorry, in a clearing. Didn't really have much activity, heard a couple of strange things, didn't really put much into it. On the way out, there were about, I think, 5 cars in our little caravan that night. Myself, Jay Bachochin, and Eric Altman were in the first car, and when we were taking the road back out to the kind of civilization, out to the main road, at one point Eric slammed on the brakes and screamed, "Did you see that?" Well, he had seen a pair of orange colored baseball size eyes above this one brush, and it, when the high beams hit it, it darted down into the brush. We all got out, you know, looking around. A few minutes later, somebody heard a grunt in the brush. Right at the same time that all this was going on, there were 5 deer that had crossed the road and went down behind the bush where the eyeshine was spotted. Myself, Ricky Cherby, and Chris Brinker, we got down into the brush trying to see if we could, you know, see a footprint, see hair on the thorns or whatever. And we found that the deer were standing behind the brush. Now, you got to understand, there were 12 of us with lights screaming excitedly because of what was just seen. These deer didn't move. We watched those deer for at least 15 minutes. They would look at us, they would look in the other direction. They would look at us, the other direction. After about 15 minutes, and this is with constant noise, constant commotion, they finally started walking very slowly, not towards us or towards the other way, but kind of in between. We decided to go down the road a little bit, make a left and go down the mountain a little bit to where we thought this thing may have gone, and we spotted the eyeshine again. I saw it first. I pulled Eric over, put him in line with the thermal imaging. He said, yeah, it's the same eyes. Both times we measured where the eye sign was sighted, and both times it measured at 9.5 feet. Don't know what to really say about that, because, you know, a large bear in Pennsylvania is maybe 7 feet, and that's a large bear. So 9.5, and you figure that's just the eyes, you get another 6 or 8 inches for the top of the head. I can't explain it. But that night in particular was probably the most fascinating to me, because not only taking into account the eyeshine itself, the grunt that was heard, but what really stood out the most was the activity or the behavior of the deer.
So yet again, I would say that the descriptions of the coloration range primarily from orange to red, but are mostly consistent with the kind of nocturnal eyeshine exhibited by, you know, most land-dwelling large mammals, which again is a little problematic, because ideally, if Sasquatch is a primate, and all, you know, evidence seems to point to the fact that it is, based on descriptions of people, you know, or the descriptions provided by witnesses. If we're dealing with a primate here, this is not a very typical characteristic for primates. Now, the other interesting thing I would simply note is, and this is by no means to try and associate Sasquatch with creatures, you know, like, you know, reptiles, but nonetheless, we do have red eyeshine that is very distinctively associated with, you know, alligators and animals like that, reptiles that are seen in nighttime circumstances when, for instance, the headlights of a vehicle strike their eye. So yet again, to actually say that red coloration is explicitly associated with Sasquatch doesn't necessarily detract from those reports, but I think that that general description of a red-eyed monster has led some researchers, along with the fact that, again, primates don't tend to actually exhibit biologically that kind of nocturnal eyeshine, it's led some people to simply say that, well, in likelihood, that reddish coloration could just be the light reflecting off of a large pupil. But of course, as is often observed with nocturnal animals, you will sometimes see what's known as tapetum lucidum, which is actually the result of light reflecting off of a thin, very reflective membrane that's within the eye. That can cause a variety of different colorations in the reflected light. Sometimes with animals like deer, you'll see a, you know, yellow or an orange. With reptiles like alligators, it's often a deep red coloration. It can even be yellow or green with certain other animal species. But the problem with assuming that there is that variety of actual eye shine associated with Sasquatch reports is that primates generally do not have that. They don't possess that reflective membrane. Now, there is one variety of primate that does, and that's a variety of lemur. But again, it's pretty much the only known variety that actually has the biological equipment, we might say, to produce that.
I don't know any mammals. I mean, there may be some in the animal kingdom that do have glowing red eyes, but I think it's probably with light shining in them that they reflect red back. I don't know of any personally. I mean, of course, I'm not a scientist. I mean, it's probably pretty not so easy to tell I'm not a scientist, actually. Well, yeah, I certainly don't believe there's any that self-illuminate. Okay, so that's kind of why I think that it's more of a paranormal experience than it is a just straight on, matter of fact Bigfoot experience. Unless in these cases, what they're calling Bigfoot is maybe a demonic or evil entity, you know, and that very well could be too.
While witnesses are frequently left rattled, unsettled, or even frightened in the wake of a Sasquatch encounter, some potential run-ins bear additional elements of mystery which only add to this effect. Many, a strikingly large number, report witnessing creatures with visibly red, sometimes glowing eyes. This additional layer of confoundment is not a scarce one-off or even an infrequent occurrence. It happens with such regularity that the question must be asked, what does this mean? The preponderance of red eyes witnessed during unusual encounters is not limited to Sasquatch. In fact, Bigfoot represents something of a minority in the overarching phenomenon of strange beings with illuminated red eyes. Some high-profile examples include the Mothman of Point Pleasant and the Flatwoods Monster of Braxton County, both from the state of West Virginia, both of which were said to sport glowing red eyes. Also the Dover Demon of Massachusetts, La Lechuza, widespread in Latin American folklore, various iterations of the werewolf-like Dogman, and many others. Encounters with supposed extraterrestrials and even ghosts are sometimes typified by this trait, leaving the research community to wonder if it is caused by a single unifying feature or a randomly occurring, disconnected visual motif. Many speculate that this attribute, when present in Bigfoot encounters, indicates a more paranormal origin than that of a biological species which fits somewhere within the ecology of planet Earth, at least as we understand it.
There was one gentleman that we talked to. This was an interesting one. Luxor, out in town of Luxor. He was with his girlfriend-to-be wife. They were in the woods, and I'm not going to elaborate. You can kind of guess, you know. So they get up, they start to walk. All of a sudden, they run straight. This creature was walking. It must have been turned. It walked almost right into them. Almost right into them. And it stopped. The eyewitnesses stopped. And of course, they're both terrified. And the interesting thing about this, the Bigfoot kind of stopped. And they said he was close enough that he saw the blood go into his eyes and the eyes turn red. That's how close he was to it. He said this thing screamed, and he said this scream was like a sonic pulse. It hit him in the chest. It was so loud. A creature went one way, and the gentleman and his wife went the other way. And the interesting thing about the eyes, red, we had in '73 in Beaver County, there was this sighting that we took from a gentleman who, he was a child then, and he was playing, and they were in a trailer. So he was playing, and he sees movement out of the side of his eye, and he looks at the window, and he said, this creature, he saw it from the side. He says the creature turned, and it looked at him. He says, then the eyes went red. He said, Brian, those eyes weren't red until this creature saw me. Then they glowed red. So is that red eye shine kind of like a defense mechanism? Hey, you know, boom, I'm going to do this to try to scare you, because certain animals, they'll do certain things to try to scare you, to show. And it kind of grinned it, like growled, and then it walked away. And he was scared. He went to his dad, and later on, I think the next day, the police came down and they found some really huge prints close to that. And I just thought that two cases where, if people talk about eye shine, two cases where those eyes weren't red until this creature saw the individual. Then the eyes turned red. And I think that's very interesting, because that's not talked about. All you really hear is, hey, I looked into the woods and I saw red eye shine.
But then cases got stranger and stranger. There were even more reports coming in, again, from other areas over a period of time. And it was the case that happened not far from there, up towards Ohiopyle, February 6, 1974, that was the case that convinced me, among others, that Bigfoot is much stranger than I had ever imagined. For a lack of a better term, we might be dealing with something that's interdimensional, that there's a physical and a non-physical component to whatever it is we're dealing with. And that story was February 6, 1974, way up deep up in the mountains. So here's this woman who lived in her cabin home all these years. She knew animals well. She was a good shot. And it was a normal evening. She's sitting there watching TV when she hears this commotion on her little front porch. There were some empty soda cans, pop cans, and something was knocking the pop cans around. There had been a pack of wild dogs had come through several weeks before. She figured, well, I bet these dogs are back. So I'll just grab my shotgun and I'll load one chamber and I'll fire over their head and scare those dogs away. So she proceeds to load the shotgun. She walks over to the front. She opens the front door, turns on the switch for the light outside. She steps out, and only about 6 feet in front of her is a 7-foot-tall, huge hair-covered creature with long arms that put his arms straight up over its head when she opened the door. She fires right into it with her shotgun. She said there's this bright flash of light, and the creature vanishes right in front of her eyes. It disappears. Well, her in-laws lived about 100 feet away. They called her, asked her what she was shooting at. She tried to tell them. The husband, the son-in-law, grabs a sidearm, and he starts walking down that dirt road. He saw a figure running down a road. As he got closer, he said he's surrounded by 4 or 5 hairy people with eyes, glowing red eyes like coals of fire. Took a couple shots and ran into the house, into the cabin. And soon after, there's a large object, like a big Christmas ornament, hovering over the woods at the same time. That's when they called the state police, because they were frightened. And this was a time period that a lot of people could remember, because at this time there was a big national truckers strike. There was gas rationing going on. There was some violence going on the highway, so the National Guard and the state police were both patrolling in Pennsylvania. Some members of both units responded to this incident. I couldn't get up there that night because I couldn't get gas. I was up there early the next morning, my team, and when I got up there, everything's back to normal, except the people were very, very shook up. I was able to interview the primary investigator, and he said by the time they found the place that night, everything was done, but he said something very strange occurred there. That he based on the animal reactions. They had a number of farm animals there, including several big dogs, and he said when they got there, not a sound. Dogs wouldn't move, they wouldn't bark, and it was a very unusual. When I got there next morning, all the dogs were barking like normal. And very commonly over the years, in many, many cases I investigated, when these huge creatures are near even the most ferocious dogs, the dogs, they shake, they cower, they don't bark, they hide. I was told by some people that even sometimes 2 or 3 days later, they wouldn't even eat properly. So that's something that it's significant, the animal reactions. But in some cases, we have animal reactions with UFO sightings as well, and even other cryptids.
Glowing eyes began appearing in reports shortly after Bigfoot fever kicked off in the U.S. As early as at least the 1950s, tales of ape-like creatures appearing in small towns across the U.S. were accompanied by this strange feature, finding an intersection with UFO sightings, and even representation in pop culture, including some of the most popular media of the day. It occurs in many places, but is predominantly seen in reports concentrated in the eastern United States, for reasons yet unknown. Researchers have noted a pattern of apparently red-eyed Sasquatch in certain places, as well as an absence in others, though the phenomenon does not seem to be entirely limited to any geographical region. Newspaper articles from across the country denote similar activity in Pennsylvania, New York, Missouri, and others. A newspaper article published on September 24, 1978 by the Register contains one prime and particularly sensational incident. The article begins, "A fortnight ago, Anna Dodrell froze with fear when she looked up from a load of dishes into the burning red eyes of a big-nosed, black-faced, hairy-headed creature staring at her through a window a few feet away." The article goes on to explain that Dodrell had seen a long, hairy arm reaching out from behind a cattle shed earlier in the evening, and had armed herself with a rifle, which lay ready on the kitchen table. The creature maintained eye contact with Dodrell through the window for 3 whole minutes, before she finally succumbed to fright and let out a scream. The entity, whatever it was, then fled back into the forest. This is one of the many tales from this era dealing with red-eyed beings that can generally be described as Sasquatch-like. Stories had been flying in the area since July of that year of strange howls in the night, mutilated animals, and additional sightings. The article would also name several additional witnesses who would spot presumably the same creature within 24 hours of Anna Dodrill's frightening report. Though a soft red glow reminiscent of the Polaroid photos of the 80s and 90s is what likely springs to mind when one hears the term eyeshine, the occurrence is not actually limited to red or reddish orange. It appears in a variety of colors and shades, depending on the animal in question, and may be perceived as blue, green, red, white, and even yellow. Eyeshine is also iridescent, meaning it may vary in brightness and tone, allotting for the angle in the line of sight, the color of the original light source, and even the mineral content of the animal's tapetum membrane. Some claim to be able to identify individual species of animal simply by observing their eyeshine, owing to shape, color, distance from the ground, and even movement. Descriptions which are assumed to belong to Sasquatch invariably take place 6 or more feet off the ground, a hallmark of encounters wherein the witness mentions the creature's eyes or face, and sharply reduce the number of potential known culprits. Given that many researchers speculate that Sasquatch is likely a close relative of human beings, some are hesitant to accept traditional eyeshine as an explanation. The trait is also not found in most apes, even further separating the possibility that this oft-observed phenomenon fits within what we think we know about Bigfoot. The problem also becomes, of course, that there is much we don't know about Bigfoot and very, very little that we know for certain. An ever-mounting pile of cases, however, which indicate the presence of red or even glowing red eyes, force us to take stock of what is going on behind the scenes, despite its apparent incompatibility with the classified zoological lexicon.
We know that from like the late 1950s, the 1960s, people started to report these glowing eyes, right? And that was, usually white light, it was usually some sort of reflection of white. The red eyes, incidentally, starts making itself more and more known whenever we have the UFO Bigfoot connection, right? That's whenever the red becomes more attuned to the eyes, as if these creatures are not living beings, but also almost mechanical, as if they're some sort of automatons sent down by these extraterrestrials. And then, the whole thing goes into the fact of, well, are these things just some sort of robots used by extraterrestrials? Now, again, we can look into the about 1976 is whenever this really catches on to the imagination, and that is whenever the $6 Million Man battles Bigfoot, who was played by Andre the Giant, and you have these glowing eyes in that. So at that point on, it becomes part of our zeitgeist, right? It becomes part of our cultural knowledge. And now people that even had a passing interest in Bigfoot now think that they are aliens and possibly even creations by alien beings. So I think we have that going on as well too. So I think the red eyes begin whenever you have the Bigfoot alien connection, and then that is grabbed on by Hollywood and makes it more part of our cultural, our shared cultural experience.
Yeah, there's several that's been reported to BFRO. I've taken a few, but there's also some that you can find online that people talk about. One of the oldest ones I found online was from this area. It was in 1960. A group of campers were at their site. It was I guess later in the evening, and one of the fellows was off to the side. He was chopping up firewood to get the fire started, or add to the fire, I can't remember which. And he has his back toward the wooded area, and he feels a poke in his ribs, and he thinks it's one of his buddies messing around, and he turns around, and he's face to face with I can't say face to face because he probably wasn't that tall, but he's looking at this 7 to 8 foot tall creature, dark collared, and he large red eyes, and it's a hairy creature, and it turns and runs. Well, that's just been a story that I've heard a few times and found online. But then I took a report from a lady, anonymously. She sent it through an email. She didn't even give me her name, but it was in the same area, pretty much in the same area. It was in 1970, and her husband were driving along, and I guess it was in front of it walked in the front of the truck, and that's what she talks about. It had big red eyes. And some people, I've heard they call it the canyon monster, because I guess, you know, this being the area where it's at. And then I took another one 2 years ago. It happened, but the sighting took place in 2014, and it was on the road leading from where we're at down into the Parsons area. And this lady was driving, going to work, and this thing walks across the road in front of her, across the guardrail, and it was a strange shape. She said she called it like a black Grinch, like the Grinch from Stole Christmas, and had like a very big gut and real shiny black hair, and walking on 2 feet, and went across the guardrail, then over the hill.
On State Game Lands 51, which is on the Chestnut Ridge, it was during a camping adventure. I had like 4 guys, maybe 5 tops in our group. There was 3 groups, just like quarter-mile apart. Eric had called down on the radio and asked if Sean or I could go up with the group that he was with, because we were familiar with the area. Sean said, I'll go up. And gas lines, it's pretty wide. It was a full moon, so you needed no flashlight whatsoever. Sean said, I'll go up. So he started. I watched him walk up this pipeline. He had a real bright reflective vest on, and then a couple of the guys behind me were hearing whoops. So I turned around and was paying attention to them, and they also had eyeshine, self-illuminating. There was no light other than the moon, red eyes. And I'm concentrating on that down there, and I just happened to turn to look to see where Sean was at, and something stepped out 1 step from the wood line and was standing on the gas line. I couldn't tell if it was looking at the other group or if it was looking down at me, because all I seen was a silhouette. So I thought, well, maybe it's a deer. Well, I turned around to get the guy's attention behind me, and they were preoccupied with all the other stuff that was going on. I turned around, looked back up again, and it stepped back into the woods. So I called Sean and I asked him, I said, hey, are you at the top of the gas line? And he said, no, I've been up here for 15 minutes. So at that point, I turned around to try to get the other guy in the group's attention, Joe, and I just turned around, looked back up the hill, and this thing crossed the gas line in like 4 strides. And the grass, I'm gonna say I'm 5'6", and the grass from the pipeline was up to my chest. Whatever it was about 4 feet above that grass, and it went across the pipeline on 2 legs.
Some have speculated if the color of the eyes has significance beyond purely biological tendencies. The color red itself is one of profound significance, particularly when speaking in the context of history and abstraction. Many societies have viewed the color with a supernatural awe, assigning it a myriad of associations. The ancient Minoan civilization, found on the Greek island of Crete over 5,000 years ago, were master artists and craftsmen. They worked in a variety of colors, both primary and secondary, which would have been a marvelous and daunting undertaking during the Bronze Age. Many colors were described by the minerals used to mix them or the place where they were found, but red was assigned multiple names depending on its application. This may speak to the importance it bore to even very ancient societies. Red is often associated with birth, life, death, violence, passion, and many other powerful human emotions and experiences. It is used as the focal color in many corporate logos, particularly dining establishments, further indicating its elemental connection with human instincts such as hunger. It often arises as a motif in fictitious narratives. It is the color of blood, and even associated with Ares and Mars, the Greek and Roman gods of war. Mars the planet is, of course, often referred to as the red planet. An oft-repeated phrase when someone becomes angry is that they are seeing red.
And if you look at the natural world around us, the color red is often a warning sign, stay away. So it may be something that people are perceiving that is actually going on rather than actually experiencing it. I think there probably is some sort of eyeshine, because that is something that comes up again and again. But I think the idea of red glowing eyes is just so frightening to us as human beings. Whether there's some sort of latent, primordial type of unconsciousness that we've had from our days that we were out in the savannah or what have you, whether it's some sort of intrinsic link to the past. But we as human beings see the color red, and especially something that has glowing red eyes, as something that's very, very frightening. So I think that whenever somebody experiences a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot encounter, they often add that little detail, not so much as it was something that they perceived, but what they believed they perceived.
As far as the prevalence of the red eyes, often something like that is sort of associated with folkloric or supernatural monsters, a red-eyed monster. And even with, the kinds of monsters that are distinctively imaginary, the kinds of things that are in bedtime stories or horror films or what have you, we associate red eyes and that kind of coloration with evil, with wicked, with, monstrous beings. The fact that the red eye is associated with Sasquatch sightings, to me, does not explicitly in any way point to something supernatural. If anything, I think that, and again, I'll cite the work of my colleague Matt Pruitt, how you can see that there are known animals that exist in the world today, but often various cultures will attribute supernatural capabilities to those animals. And one of the reasons for the supernatural, ability that they end up having associated with them by various groups is because of their behavior. You look at like a tiger, and this is a great example that Matt Pruitt will give you. Tigers are extremely stealthy, even though they're very large animals. They have to be stealthy if they're going to be successful hunters. And so often that very stealthy, silent movement associated with a very large animal ends up being equated with ghost-like behaviors. And indeed, you actually find these kinds of attributes that are projected onto those kinds of animals. And there are other species that also take on these supernatural qualities in various cultures. So the general idea would be that maybe Sasquatch does the same thing. It has certain characteristics or certain physical traits that might even seem anomalous. They might appear a little frightening. I think a lot of things about a Sasquatch sighting occurring at night, especially for most people who never expect to see something like that, let alone believe that such a creature exists, when you have that kind of encounter, you're going to probably think, wow, that was really scary. And any physical traits that you recall seeing during that encounter are going to be amplified in hindsight. And you're going to say, my gosh, it was huge. The thing had red eyes. It was really scary. It stank like hell. I mean, this was a horrible experience, and I never want to have to see one of these things again. So it would be easy to see how those kinds of characteristics would become imbued not only into the persona of these creatures, but ultimately would become part of the mythos. Their eyes glow and they have these maybe supernatural qualities. They're only seen at night. They can come and go as they please. Their footprints will just vanish into nowhere when they're traveling. Really, in my opinion, there might be good explanations, physical ones, for all those characteristics, but they definitely would appeal to those who would seek to try and find a more supernatural explanation for the relic hominoid enigma.
Much in the same way that Sasquatch seems to hint at a more powerful, independent relative of the human species, does the color red also seem to indicate some kind of primal connection? Or is this simply an inevitable condition brought about by the fact that there are only so many colors the human eye can perceive? Given the wealth of scientific information that points to natural occurrences involving red eyes in known animals, we are presented with something that could be viewed as fairly mundane. Unfortunately, the things we know about red and illuminated eyes in animals do not serve as qualifiers for any known primates, even the elusive night monkeys of the Amazon River. The question revolving around the red-eyed Sasquatch ultimately becomes the same as that around Sasquatch itself. What really is it? Unraveling the nature of Bigfoot's red eyes likely requires more information than the research community is presently equipped with. There are numerous points of data missing from the equation, preventing us from settling on any watertight theory. If it is a biological animal, then we can narrow down the list of possible causes, pointing to intrinsic animal traits and genetic abnormalities. But if the creature is something stranger, something supernatural or from beyond our world, as some often speculate, then the presence of glowing red eyes hints at the inclusion of things we can only guess at. Things our scientific lexicon is not yet equipped to address, but which we may, in time, overcome. For now, as Bigfoot continues to make fleeting appearances across the globe, red eyes remain one of the most mysterious recurrent elements, or common denominators, as they have done since the very early days of newspaper articles and testimony by shaken witnesses. Whether biological, supernatural, or something distinctly different from either of those things, the red-eyed Bigfoot is likely to continue making appearances. Where and when, no one can say. For now, we might all do well to be on the lookout for pairs of red eyes peering from out of the darkness. Whether biological, paranormal, or some strange thing nestled in between, somewhere, at any given time, the red-eyed Bigfoot is watching.